Hello, Stitch People. Welcome to the Stitch People podcast. I'm Lizzie Bean, your host and the founder of Stitch People, where our goal with cross-stitching is to inspire your personal creativity, and our goal with podcasting is to help you make some new friends while you're at it. Today's episode with Erin is so much fun. She has such great thoughts and perspectives about everything she's up to. We talk some philosophical outlooks on perfectionism. We talk about gardening. She's super great at it. So much to learn there. I really enjoyed getting to know her, and I know you will too. Thank you so much for being willing to chat today for an episode of the Stitch People podcast. It's so great for you to join me. I was going to say us. I have a tendency to do that, like the royal we, like the we at Stitch People, but it's just me. Where are you calling from today?
I'm actually in Highland, Michigan in the United States.
Where in Michigan is that on the glove?
We're kind of like right here, not quite center. So it's not really mid-Michigan. It's not really like southeastern. It's kind of like in some weird place, but I'm almost directly north of Ann Arbor, between Ann Arbor and Flint.
I was born in Ann Arbor, so
well, there you go.
That's great. Yeah. Okay. How's the weather there right now? Is it real chilly already?
We've actually had some really beautiful like days in the low 60s here recently. There's frost on the ground in the morning as it is, and then it warms up and it gets cold again. So for November, you can't complain.
Oh, good. I always liked that. I had kind of my early childhood Michigan, and my memories are that the seasons are really clear. Like I feel like there was always like a wet and rainy spring, and then like a hot and humid summer, and then like piles of leaves and crispy for the fall, and then like feet of snow for the winter. Is that true, or is that just like my kid brain idealizing?
It's definitely true, but Michigan also has this weird thing where like you can be in a very clear season, all of a sudden like in the middle of winter it's gonna be like, hey, it's gonna be like 55 and all the snow is gonna melt for 2 days, and then we're back to winter again. Same with summer, we can be having gorgeous summer days, and then nope, we're gonna get like 50s for some random reason in July.
Just a little moody. It's just like it's Michigan weather is just like a preteen. Just like I'm not okay today. Yeah, I love that. So tell us a little about yourself, Erin.
Well, I am a mom of two. I have a son and a daughter. They're both elementary school age now.
Oh, great.
And married to my husband for just celebrated 10 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
A full decade.
Yeah,
that's a monumental, postmark on the life map.
That's
great.
It is. And then, so we moved, I've lived in Michigan my entire life, but we moved here to Highland to kind of get away from like the suburbs a little bit about, oh my gosh, 6 years, almost 7 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so we have some acreage, and we're kind of got, massive garden, chickens, kind of doing we're not off grid because I don't want to misrepresent it, but we've got solar, and geothermal energy here.
Geothermal. My parents were looking at building a house, and they ended up buying one, but in Maine, and they were considering geothermal energy, and that's the first I had heard of it and learned about it. Will you, just for listeners, because I think it's an interesting subject, will you explain like what that means? Because I think people kind of know what solar energy is, and like you put up the panels, it collects the sun. How does geothermal energy work?
So geothermal energy, it almost seems like almost like a misnomer a little bit, because geothermal actually uses electricity. So it's not actually a source of power, it's a source of heating and cooling.
Aha, so, that's right.
So it uses electricity as the power source. So basically what you do is you have a ton of feet of tubing installed underground. In Michigan, the depth varies, but in Michigan we had to go 6 feet because we get a nice cold winter. So well below the frost line here. Yeah. And it's kind of neat to see, like we just installed it over like the summer. So it's
cool.
recent, and it's like really cool, like little coils all underground, like just massive trenches. My whole backyard's all dug up right now, but the grass will grow back.
Yeah.
Basically I would say water with some coolants, to like some chemicals, just so it doesn't like totally freeze. And if it did get cold, but water's pumped through the tubes. And because the temperature is more or less stable in the winter, the ground it will take the heat off the earth and use it as sort of residual energy and just heat it up additionally if needed. And in the summer, it's the opposite effect. And geothermal is actually the opposite of what most people are used to with air conditioning, where it's really inefficient. Geothermal is super efficient to cool your house.
Right.
A little less efficient for heating, especially when you're in a really cool climate, which we have like a fireplace, so we can burn wood too.
Cool. Yeah. So explaining it to a child version, if I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, would be like when you go deep enough in the earth, like you said, like below that freeze line, 6 feet or more, the temperature of the dirt there, the earth is more or less the same. Throughout the year.
Pretty stable throughout the year.
You can utilize like the cool temperature of that earth to cool off your house, essentially, because it just is what it is. It exists year round. And so the coils kind of, like you said, carry that temperature essentially through. I think it's so neat. So you said you're not really off grid, but it does sound like you're like super self-sustaining, which is really, really neat.
Yeah. I mean, so when we bought the house, it was just it had power lines. We're still connected to the grid. There was no point to like not stay connected when we installed the solar panels. But yeah, we've been able to get rid of the propane as our heat source. So that's been kind of nice. And so I do like, I mean, we have our garden self-sustain. I mean, that's an odd goal, right? Like you never exactly know where that target is, but that's always something in mind. Like I do enjoy growing our own food and having all that stuff too.
I love that. Spencer and I went on a kick this summer. We bought all these books about it. I have this great manual, really is what it is, called the Self-Sufficient Backyard. And it's got like all these layouts for various sizes of backyards, of ideas of things you can do to have like a chicken coop or some bees or, a little vegetable garden. Like I get it in my head that I'm like going all in, but I don't have the time. So like you said, the goal, it's always really hard. But like one thing I want to do is figure out, I know we need to like look at codes around here, but I want to look at like water runoff collection, like collecting the gutter water fun. And to help water like a very small urban vegetable garden. I feel like I can start there. And maybe like a greenhouse, like a small one, so that we can have like some year-round vegetables. I feel like that's doable. I need to just like lower my expectations, get that under control, and then maybe start adding like a chicken or two, and then maybe some bees. I really want bees. That's my big, I love bees.
I have a good friend in the area who, I mean, they have just like, I think 30 plus hives now. They have a ton, massive amount. So we have a source for honey, so I'm less inclined to have bees, but we've talked about having them put some hives on the property, which would be really neat. It's good
to spread them around. There's like for those who don't know, there's a big like bee issue in the world. Just the way that we have developed our lands essentially, and the way that farming is. So instead of people farming like we used to, where it was like family farms where you'd grow your wheat and your corn and your vegetables, like a whole bunch of different stuff on each family plot. Now we have these huge swaths of like cornfields and wheat fields. And so the bees don't get enough variety in like their little bee diets, and they die out. And they're like a really integral part of our ecology system. like wildly important in a way that I didn't know.
You seem really into bees. Did you know, I just recently learned it, that depending on what bees pollinate, the honey tastes totally different.
I have heard that. I
didn't know that. I just learned it recently.
What was I watching? Oh, there's this show. Okay, so I love British television. We subscribe to the like BritBox app.
Oh yeah, we do too.
There's this show called This Farming Life. You'll love it.
Look it up.
You'll love it. It is like balm to my soul. Like it is just. It's like there's nothing competitive about it. It's just sort of a unscripted. I say reality gently because it's not like high drama reality. It just follows people in their lives. But it follows like Scottish farmers, and some are like cows and some are sheep and some are vegetable, crops. And the season that I'm on is these two gals bought a farm. They've never done it before. And they were doing their first harvest of honey. And it shows them like tasting it for the first time. And she had this expression on her face. She's like, oh my gosh. She said, I did not expect this. She said, it tastes like what our wildflowers smell like.
Oh, wow.
Because that's, like you just said, that's like the source of pollen for these bees. So it was a very floral tasting honey. And I had heard that, but I've never, I mostly just have like grocery store honey. I try and buy like the local brands of grocery store honey, but even then it's just kind of honey. But I think that's so cool that it can affect the flavor. Yeah, that's new news to me. Like one of those tidbits of information, you hear it all over suddenly. But
yeah.
Oh, that's so great. So what has been like, has there been anything particularly sad? Like, well, first of all, is it satisfying to you? Is it what you thought it would be? Is there anything like surprising or different than you thought it would be as you make efforts to sort of be more self-sufficient?
So, I mean, obviously, like there's a lot of, the garden, I think, has been one of the biggest surprises. I never grew, I did not even consider myself to have a green thumb. I pretty much consider myself to like be the kind of person who like kills everything they try to grow up until I think we started the garden in 2018.
Oh, wow.
And so I was really surprised at first it worked, like that I was actually able to plant seeds and things would grow.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how seeds work. The most interesting thing is, and the gardening is so unpredictable. So some years I've had like the best crop for like the leafy greens, like spinach and lettuces and all those, and just mediocre to terrible for like peppers and tomatoes and like certain things. And then some years it's a total vice versa. And for some reason, and like even things in the same family, like my zucchini is usually the thing that you have like so much of. And my yellow squash are great. The zucchini, not so much this year. So it's just, gardening is so quirky and unpredictable.
Yeah.
And to some extent, I love it and hate it at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it can be frustrating, especially when it's like you said, like, well, I get, that's how seeds work. And there is that certain element of, yeah, you plant a seed, you give it the right amount of moisture and warmth and light, and it will grow. Like that's how it works. But at the same time, because it is sort of systematic like that, then it is frustrating when it's like, well, what is going on that it's not doing that for whatever reason? Well, I mean, that's so cool.
That's how a seed works, I think, like in a controlled environment. But I think the thing that you have to remember is like outside, it's not. And there's so many invisible things. Well, the weather is not necessarily invisible, but that, pests and animals, and there's just the soil is a huge thing that we had to learn so much about.
Yeah.
Because this is old farmland, like it was farmed in like the 1800s. This plot here, so it's like, yeah, they strip the soil.
Oh no.
Yeah.
And so is that something you have to like mix in nutrients and like literally?
Yeah. And we finally got chickens, so now we're trying to make some of our own compost. But we constantly have to add into our soil because it's not the best.
Oh man. Well, that is so cool. And now I'm curious. So for those who are just listening, what I can see on Erin's screen in the Zoom call is that behind her is like this behemoth craft wall that is beautifully organized. There's like little drawers of what I'm assuming is floss, and we've got like hoops hanging and like all these great storage for crafting. So I'm sitting here wondering, okay, so you run like a giant garden to feed your family and you're doing all this cool stuff with your house. How do you have time for cross stitching and crafting in general? Because I'm assuming you're the type who probably does more than just cross stitch.
I do more than one craft. Like I can't, I'm very much not monogamous with crafting. I don't know too many crafters who are though.
I know, same.
But yeah, so I did make cross stitch my business. So this is my office behind me. That's why I have this level of stuff.
Perfect. I love that.
But I mean, I do enjoy like an hour or two of TV, downtime. Sure. And I think that's one of the best times to cross stitch because it just, I feel a lot less, I don't know if guilty is the right word, but it's, they say like TV is guilty pleasure, but if I can have something very like visual done after I sit for a couple episodes, it doesn't feel so unproductive.
Totally. Keeping your hands busy, it's a good balance too. This is the justification I use for when I'm watching TV and stitching, but it's so easy, like zone out, right? With a screen in front of your face when you're watching TV. But when you have something tangible in your hands that draws your eye away from the screen, and so it makes it so you're more like kind of watching to the TV, but your focus is kind of on something physical. I justify that like it's better for my eyes. So, I'm making healthy choices. That's great. So is your primary stitching time sort of in your wind down time? You mentioned it's your business. So do you stitch more in your office space, like during the day? What's kind of your workflow?
I rarely stitch in here. This is usually where I make orders and, like do the computery stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a whole area. Well, not a whole area. So it's like I took over an end table and, I've got like underneath there, I've got my project bag stashed up there.
Right.
So of course I don't have to make 2 trips, but yeah, I usually stitch upstairs because that's just my routine. It's just, you get in the habits.
I love that. That's why, I have found, before I had like an office in our house, early on in Stitch People, like I remember we had a couple articles and people were like, send us a picture of your studio. And I was like, I don't really have one, and all I had was exactly because of what you just said, because I would like to stitch out of my chair or out on the sofa, and I'd have to come in to where my computer was, or just take my laptop out and do kind of like work. But I had the little cart on wheels that I had an IKEA one. Now there's another brand that's really similar and it's got all the cool attachments or whatever. But I really liked that it was mobile, because it was like, and I will go to a more comfortable location now so that I can, I'm not just glued to one place. So as far as your cross stitch business goes, do you sell custom portraits? Do you sell more than that? Do you design your own, other cross stitch kind of patterns to sell? Tell us what your cross stitch business looks like.
Yeah. So years ago, like 2015, 2016, I can't even remember. I think I started because of Stitch People, because I had people wanting those patterns.
Yeah.
So that was like from the very beginning, it was a few custom portraits or
Awesome.
just custom patterns that people would then stitch. It got time consuming quickly.
It sure does. It to like at a surprising extent, right? Where you're
Yes.
like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot.
It is. So eventually it turned into my own patterns that I designed, and it took a few years, but I did end up taking custom requests quite a few years ago.
Yeah. What was the ultimate decision behind that? Was it a time constraint thing or a stress thing, or did you just simply enjoy doing your own stuff more? Kind of what was the driver behind it?
It might have been a combination of all three, right? The stress, the time caused stress.
Yeah,
and the
so much stress.
impact enjoyment. And then it just became like a decision to kind of curb, because once the enjoyment, that was my biggest concern making cross stitch a business. Is I don't want it not like my hobby anymore.
Yeah.
So once the time, like it became very difficult to price things fairly to me.
Right. Oh yeah.
At a price point that people would also want to buy.
Right.
So I got tired. So once I decided what my prices were going to be that were actually more fair for the time it actually takes to complete a portrait, I eventually got tired of people being like, what? That's how much? So I just decided it's time.
It's funny. I had a conversation with Kate Anderson. I don't know if that episode will be released before or after this one, but she makes her own patterns too, sells them on Etsy. We were talking about the kind of surprising and cumbersome nature of sample stitching, how you're more likely to sell a pattern if people can see a finished photo of it, but that the time it takes to stitch something prevents you from like designing more for people to enjoy. Yeah. And then she also mentioned that it also runs the risk. She's had some people on Etsy who think because there's a sample stitch photo of what the pattern looks like when you're done, it's a $5 pattern download or whatever on Etsy, but people think they're getting like the finished product for $5.
Yeah.
And we just had a good laugh about that. This is like one of my big soapboxes, because when you think of, I mean, as far as a cross stitch portrait goes, and I'm sure anything of a similar size, like a 4x6, say, finished piece, materials wise, a overestimation is like $10 worth of fabric, floss, the hoop you need, the needle you need, whatever. Yeah. Then you have, if you're shipping it somewhere, depending, anywhere from $10 to $20 of shipping. If you're putting it in more than just an embroidery hoop to frame it, you're looking at least, I don't know, $2 for the embroidery hoop all the way up to a $10 or $12 or $15, maybe even $20 nice frame. So already we're at $50 and you haven't even put in your time.
Yeah.
You know, and time, you could say like raw, what am I worth per hour? But also what is all of your experience worth and all of your artistic input and all of the, knowledge and experience that you've gained over the years. You know what I mean? There's a reason that managers in a company who've been there 20 years get paid more than the new managers just because just by being there, they're more valuable. And so, if you're only charging $50 for a custom portrait, I mean, you're losing money. You're literally giving it away. And people don't understand not only the time it takes, the raw time, but the skill and the knowledge and, the difference between a well-done portrait that has care and attention and one that's just like slapdash or new, a less experienced stitcher. Not to say a less experienced stitcher shouldn't try and sell, but just there's a reason one stitcher might charge $100 versus like $250 for something really custom. So I'm really proud of you for that, making that distinction. And I'm really glad you brought it up because it's something a lot of people run into. And at the end of the day, it's like you just have to trust that the people who want what you have to offer will find you and will see the value in it. Because it's really easy to get afraid that like, well, if I charge what I'm worth, no one will want to buy it. And so then you devalue yourself, which is worse.
Yes, I agree. It's hard, but I think it educates people too.
Mm-hmm.
When people, I think anybody who crafts, people will like, you'll get those random Facebook messages from friends who see something. Could you make this?
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, but it would cost this much. And then it feels, whoa, so I think it's always good to like give people a good reference and how much materials are, time is,
especially stuff like you just said, if you post something personal on Facebook and somebody's like, oh, I love that, I want that. I find sometimes when people say you made like your dream quilt for yourself and it's taken kind of years on and off to put together and you're pulling out all the stops for yourself because you want to have a fun project. So not only are your friends seeing this cool craft you can do, but they're seeing like the prime example of it. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you want to wait a couple years and have me put all of my time and attention into it and then, compensate me accordingly, sure.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So tell me more about the other crafts that you do beyond just cross stitching. Well, first of all, do you do embroidery at all? And then in addition to needlework, what else do you do?
So the only embroidery I've done is like counted thread embroidery. So like black work or that style.
I love black work. Can you describe a little bit what it kind of is?
Well, so, I know that there's like an official definition of what technical black work is, where the back, it looks exactly like the front, but I don't do that kind of black work.
Too much time.
No, too much time. It's more or less a pattern that's designed usually with some kind of repeating, when it was a pattern, I'm going to repeat the word pattern twice. So it's going to be confusing, but it's a design that has some repeating patterns within it. And the traditional ones are all black. There's nice, really cool modern ones now that have colors and different things. The patterns can be altered to have shading elements in the designs, which is gorgeous. I'm not doing a great job of describing it, but you typically only use either the back stitch or the running stitch.
Yeah.
And there's
very geometric, would you say? Even with the floral ones. Yeah. It's still very geometric, which is kind of what you're getting at with like repeating patterns.
Yeah. And I've seen some gorgeous ones where like the pattern repeats, but they take away elements to add shading, take away or add. There's some gorgeous blackwork patterns out there.
It's cool. It's very, very clean looking. It's very intricate looking. To me, because like you said, it's pretty much just like running stitch or back stitch, just like straight stitches, going various directions. Because of that, it's deceptively simple in its execution because the stitch itself is the most simple stitch you could do, but the patterns are very intricate. So it's kind of like a big bang for your buck. Like you don't have to technically know very much. You just have to really pay attention, I would guess, to the patterns.
Yes, I agree. They're actually not that complicated and they go fast. There's just a lot of detail and it can be really frustrating when you realize I missed one little stitch over this side. It's like, do I go back and fix it or probably not.
Yeah. I've never tackled one, but I've seen a lot and I think they're gorgeous. That's so cool. That's awesome. So, okay. So what else? What else do you like to do?
So I want to say recently, but I've gotten into like hand lettering, brush lettering over the last couple of years. I absolutely love that. I find it very calming and relaxing.
Oh, I love that.
Apologies. My dog is barking. I can control just about everything but the animals.
I've got 3. I know how it goes.
Yeah.
How dare that mailman show up at exactly. Tell me, what do you do with the brush lettering? Do you make like cards or do you do like quotes and prints or is it just... How do you use it? What do you do with it?
A lot of brush lettering. I think I decided a while ago that I would just keep brush lettering for me.
Love it.
I've made a lot of my hobbies into like businesses or side hustles, things like that. So I don't particularly like journaling, but I do like sketching. So in my sketchbook in the morning, which is kind of like a visual journal, I guess I can call it.
I love that.
I enjoy, if I write, I enjoy practicing that. And I find it very cute. My daughter is like, she's in 3rd grade, so they're finally learning cursive. And so she's very into it now. And she's been like asking me to help her with the lettering, and it's very cute.
I love that. That's great. I broke my arm in 3rd grade, and it was right when we were starting cursive. So my cursive is very, is honestly, the word is elementary. Like if I do cursive, it looks just like you would kind of find in a book because I never really got my own style with it because I was always behind. So it was just like very rote following those pages. 3rd grade. What a time. What a time. Do your kids like to craft with you in general?
Yeah, they both like to craft. My son is very into anything. Like he will, when he figures out what he's actually doing is collage. That's what he loves to cut and glue. If he can cut things out and glue it, like he loves that.
There's something very creative about that, like making something new from existing things. I like that.
That's his thing. My daughter likes to try a lot of things. I don't think she's quite found what she likes she's perfectionism, I think, is the worst thing with creativity. And it's something I've struggled with for a long time. And I see it in her. My son, he just doesn't care. He's just happy doing whatever, if he's happy doing it, he'll do it. Right.
Yeah.
And my daughter is always trying to see if she's doing it right. And I'm always like, if you like it, that's right. So I think, she likes trying, she's tried watercolors with me. She's tried the lettering. She, likes to draw or sketch. We have a lot of those how to draw books. But she's always very concerned with it being right or looking like it's quote unquote supposed to. So I've got to try to help her understand that, like, if she enjoys it, that's what it's about.
Right, right. I relate to that. 10 out of 10 can relate. It's a plague, I think. And it's hard because sometimes it's good to have standards for things, but it's easy to adopt the belief that everything has a standard, by which to measure its correctness. It's hard. It's so hard. So do you come from a particularly artsy or crafty family, like that you grew up in?
Not particularly at all.
Oh.
My mom said that crafting skipped a generation with her because her mother could craft. And actually, a lot of her sisters do, but unfortunately, we never lived close to them growing up. But I loved, like Michael's is a craft chain. I don't know if you grew up around here, so that's like the one we always had growing up.
Sure.
But going into Michael's and just picking up like whatever project it was at the time. So growing up, I was always trying new crafts, and she couldn't help me with them at all, other than like trying her best. But yeah, that's how I got started with cross stitch. I think I was 8, and we bought just like a dimensions kit in the store.
Yeah.
And that's how I got started.
I love that. Did you just sort of figure it out on your own? Was it something your mom helped you figure out, or were you just like, go,
No, I read the directions and just, it was the directions that came with the kit. I didn't even know about embroidery hoops. I'm not even kidding, for at least a decade.
Oh no.
I think I was at least in college. So like, 18, 19, 20, before I realized, like, I knew they existed.
Sure.
But before I realized like what it did, I stitched in hand for years. And once I know it's painful. Like I could not do it now.
Physically painful. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I was doing a Michael's class. I just like choked on my words. We're doing like a 4-part crafting for the holidays class. Our last one is tomorrow. And I have the whole point of these classes is like what to do with your cross stitch pieces once you're done with them, like ideas of what to do with them for the holidays, and like putting one in a mason jar lid or making it an ornament or whatever. So I have the finished piece like all ironed and ready to go, but I have been teaching a bonus stitch. Like we are going to go over the mason jar thing, but we'll also talk about French knots or whatever. So there's a little stitching at the beginning, and I keep getting questions from people like, why aren't you using a hoop? Or like, should I be stitching without a hoop? And I'm like, no. I was like, I'm just holding the fabric because I don't want to, I've got it nicely ironed for like the next portion of this class. I don't want to put any ridges in the hoop, but it's so hard to me to not have that structure of the hoop to help me hold it. And the tension in the fabric is so, useful.
I know. Whenever I stitch in hand, especially like those small, quick things, like I have trouble finding the hole. Like I can't, because I don't flip over anymore. And I'm like, I can't, where's the hole? Like where's normally I don't have that problem at all.
Right. Yeah. When you have an embroidery hoop, it's like this muscle memory.
Yeah.
And you're like touching on all the pro cross stitch points, because that's exactly why one of my top 3 things to try and force yourself to do when you're a new cross stitcher is, always make sure the diagonals go the same direction, but to really, really force yourself to not flip over like that, because it'll twist your floss, it'll create confusion. And if you just force yourself to not do it as much as possible, you really develop a stunning like hand-eye coordination where you can put the needle right where it needs to go almost without thinking, and it saves so much time in the long haul. When did that sort of become, when did you adopt that?
The not flipping? Oh gosh, I don't know, but it probably only took maybe 2 projects.
Oh sure. Okay, so that's just how it's always been for you.
Yeah, I haven't flipped in forever, but I do put I don't know, I'm trying to think of how I hold things now. I do it's my index finger, I think, or one of my fingers is behind. And I usually just the way that I hold it, I can actually kind of touch one of my fingers. It's near, just the way I hold it, it's always been like my fingers near, and it's usually really close. Like you said, it just becomes some weird muscle memory.
Yeah, it does. And I like that you can sort of use your fingers on the backside to guide, just as a little reference point of where you're working, and it makes it easier to find your way.
It depends. Like certain projects, I don't even need to do that. But the one I'm working on now is detailed on 32 count linen or 36 count linen. Oh, yeah, it's a beast. I commend you.
That's very, very fine. Is it a like a 2x scale one, or is it tiny stitches?
So there's a lot of quarter stitches, so those are over 1.
Oh, okay.
But
oh my gosh,
the cross stitches are over 2. So it's equivalent of 18 count.
Sure. Right. I like how that looks. So essentially, for those who might not follow as you listen later, when you can have a finished cross stitch piece where the cross stitching is the exact same size, if you do it on a size 14 Aida versus a size 28 count, like linen, because the 28 count is literally just double this, or it has double the holes essentially. So, and you can, instead of going 1 hole over 1 hole up for your cross stitches, you go 2 over 2 up. But since it's like half the size, the cross stitches themselves remain the same size. I hope that makes sense. That was really bad way to describe it. Or for what you're working on, like the size 18 versus 36. Yeah. And then the holes aren't so visible, and it gives the visual effect of like a little bit more of a linen canvas versus that wholly Aida fabric.
Yeah. The other reason that I actually first tried stitching over 2 was because of another Stitch People project, because I loved when I gotten really into designing them, they became quite detailed, because in order to do like shirts, and when you stitch over 2, it makes it so much easier to do fractional stitches.
Yes,
to get those details in. So
which I do a lot of. Yeah, and they're all of the patterns, and people are like, "What the heck is this?" And it's like, just poke your needle through the hole, just go for it, or outside the hole.
Yeah, and I always get so annoyed trying to poke I find it takes so long to get the hole right in the center of the Aida fabric. So I actually really enjoy when I'm stitching a detailed project to just do it over 2, because then I can just have that center hole and I don't have to play with it.
Right. It's like pre-divided for you. Yeah, that's a really good tip for those of you listening. Give it a try. Size 28 and 36 are typical, I think, as far as linen weaves.
For 14 and 18. Yeah.
Yep. So that's great. So what lights you up most in the world? Is it crafting? Is it your kids? Like, what is the subject that you just get so fiery passionate about that you could talk about forever and ever and bore everyone around you to death?
It's probably crafting or gardening.
Oh, I love it. I love it. What about, is it just in general, both of those subjects? Or are there specific things about them? Are there things that they share that get you going? I think that they're both creative. Like gardening isn't, I think some people might think of it as creative, and I'm very specific, because a lot of people will talk to me. If I say I'm into gardening, I'll have people who are like houseplant gardeners, which yes. I have one houseplant. I don't even know what it is. Like I couldn't tell you the name of it. I am very much a veggie and herb gardener. Yeah. Outside gardening. Outside gardening. I do actually grow some microgreens inside, which is nice. Kind of like, I love them too. But, that's cool. But yeah, so I think that they are like,
like most crafts, you produce something, you put effort in, and you have this thing that you've made. And I think that gardening, while, produce will perish, but you can do things to preserve it too, which I also am passionate about. But I think it's very similar in that aspect. You put a lot of effort in, and even though you're not exactly the one like causing the plant to grow, like it does feel like your efforts have done that and created this thing, yield this produce or whatever it is, that you can, save in some form, dry your herbs, can your, pickles or, cucumbers and pickles, whatever it is. So I think they're similar. And I do think I like the process of creating something and turning it into something else.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that idea. And I don't think it's wrong at all to say that gardening is a direct result of your efforts. Like if you don't plant the seed can't grow. If you don't fertilize the soil, the nutrition won't get to the growth of the plant. That it's definitely a one-to-one correlation, I think. I think that's so great. It's always very satisfying to have something to show for your efforts. There's something very, I think, biological about it. It's like there's cave drawings on walls. You just want to leave your mark, and leave something in the world and make something out of nothing. I think that's a very almost primal drive. Do you have any advice that if you could go back and tell yourself, go back, and it could be as a child, it could be last year, it could be at any point in your past life. Is there any piece of advice that you would go back and share?
I think what I would have loved being able to tell myself as like a young girl or teenager is to try to ditch the perfectionism early on. I think I mentioned it with my daughter, and I see a lot of my old qualities, and then they're still there, but I am what I like to call a recovering perfectionist. Like
I love that.
It's not healthy, and it's very much counterintuitive to a lot of my my hobbies and interests. Like I think creating an art is inherently just messy and the opposite of perfect. Right. And you can't create without being willing to accept that. And I've always loved to create, but then I have this weird, like desire to always have things look right or just so, or be hypercritical of my own stuff.
Right.
And it was also really very much directed at me. I could say the most complimentary things if someone else did it.
Yeah.
But if it was my own, right? Like I was like, oh no.
Isn't that fascinating? I think that's very universal. People are way kinder generally to others than they are to themselves.
It's sad.
It's really sad. And it's detrimental. It's devastating because your brain knows that you think that about yourself. You know, that constant loop of criticism. Yeah. Do you have any like tips or pointers that you would give to what things that you have done to start to shift that? Like you said, you're a recovering perfectionist. So what kinds of things have helped you to get to that point of awareness and change?
So creating more, being more prolific, because the more you create, it's not all going to be good. Like it just can't. Yeah. It can't. I mean, like I can't. Oh gosh, I think it might have been. I'm going to misattribute the quote, and I'm not even going to say it right. So I'm not even going to try. But someone said all of your work, like if you take all your work, only 50% of it will ever be the best half of your work, right? So no matter what you do, half of it's always going to be the worst half, right? Yeah. So I think just try to create more, whatever it is. Like I do enjoy sketchbooks or that's my thing, because it's easy to just pick up a pencil and doodle something. It doesn't even have to be good. It shouldn't be good. That shouldn't be the standard. Just do something. Yeah. And like you were mentioning, that the loop in your brain, I think catching thoughts, like recognizing that and catching it early and trying to shift those is really, really critical. Right. Because the way you talk to yourself is really, really important. Yeah.
And I would add to the catching it and sort of shifting that voice in your head, but also trying to be very non-judgmental about it. Like, because it's one thing to catch that voice like, oh no, I'm being really mean to myself. Or you could catch that voice in the back of your head and be like, dang it, Lizzie, like you stinker, why are you talking to yourself like that again? Like it could turn into its own form of like berating yourself. So to just be like, oh, my favorite phrase is, oh, that's interesting. Like when you notice a negative thought about yourself go through your head, is, oh, well, that's interesting. I clearly have very high expectations about this particular thing. interesting, because that just kind of removes a negative judgment or even a positive judgment that might not be warranted. If that, some people struggle with that, just like it going too far with that, so yeah, I like that. Just catching, like you said, catching that voice in your head and sort of shifting it. The output thing I think is also really important too, because I think it was Ed Sheeran interview that I don't know. A friend told me about it. She said she heard an interview with Ed Sheeran where, or maybe it was Shawn Mendes, one of the two. Oh, maybe it was a conversation between the two of them is why I'm remembering that. One of them was telling the other that with songwriting, with creative process, he feels like it's a faucet and you have to just turn on the faucet and leave it on to get all like the brown gross water out, and then the clear water will flow. And a lot of people turn on the faucet and see that brown gross water because the faucet hasn't been on in a long time. A lot of people hold back and don't let themselves do what they want to do. And so they see that brown water come out and it's like, and they just turn it right off because it's, not good or whatever judgment you have about it. But it's like, no, you got to turn on the faucet, just let it flow till you can get the clean, clear, good water that's like, pipes got to clear out a little bit,
Yeah.
And that's just human. That's just the way it is,
Yeah.
We just don't broadcast our bad projects, quote unquote bad, or our less successful endeavors as loudly as we broadcast the good ones. So it's easy to feel like no one but you is a failure,
Yeah, everyone has brown water.
Yes, exactly. And it's just in my trash can and not on Instagram.
Exactly.
Where it belongs. Like, oh, that did not work out. I love that. Okay, so I feel like that was like a very uplifting and appropriately philosophical note to sort of wrap our official interview up on. I'm going to jump over to do our rapid fire round and just get to know some of your favorite things. I could sing the song. What is that? Sound of music. So what is your favorite flower?
My favorite flower is Gerber daisies.
Ooh, good choice. What's your favorite vegetable or herb to grow?
Oh, that's hard. I love lettuces. They're probably my favorite.
Okay. What about, I'm curious, what about them is your favorite?
When it works out, this last year was horrible for lettuce, but when they work out, they're quick, they're fast. Like I eat so much lettuce. So to me, it's like so nice to just be able to go like clip it. And I use so much of it. And I love also growing microgreens. So I do grow some lettuce microgreens. So they're very versatile.
Cool. I love that. Do you prefer baking or cooking?
Cooking.
Okay. Do you like to travel a lot? Do you have a favorite travel destination you've ever been to?
I am sadly a homebody.
I don't think that's sad. Don't you dare apologize for that.
I don't travel a lot, and I'm not really sure I mean, I would love to see the world, but I also hate flying. So there's that.
Fair enough. No, I think it's okay to make your world the world, right? That's okay. Do you have a favorite book of all time?
I think my favorite book of all time might be A Wrinkle in Time. But I did not like the movie.
I didn't see the movie specifically because I liked the book so much and I just didn't want to ruin it. It was like, when did you read it? Was it,
I've reread that book more than any other book. Yeah. But I think I first read it in like elementary school. I don't know what grade.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have a favorite song and or musician or band?
I don't think I do anymore. I think I would have, like as a teenager in my 20s, sure. I totally would have. But now it's just not whatever my kids are listening to.
I feel that. That was like my dad. I remember I was into Backstreet Boys and he was like, fine, it's fine. I have a sneeze. I'm so sorry. It's going to happen. I can feel it. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. Do you have a favorite color?
Purple.
Favorite, let's see. Favorite. Do you have a favorite season? Fall, winter, spring, summer?
Fall.
Oh, so this is like your jam right now.
Yes, this is it.
I love that. Do you have a favorite? I got to think of a good one. I'm going to look at my cheat sheet. Ooh, do you have a favorite birthday party you've ever had?
I think my 30th birthday was really fun.
Yeah, I love that. What about it?
We just worked out that one of my friends was planning on having like a euchre, like the card game, euchre night, and it overlapped with my birthday, so we just kind of turned it into like a birthday party, and we had a euchre tournament, and I came in second place despite drinking a little too much.
That's very satisfying.
Yeah, right.
Birthday surprise. So, do you play a lot of games? Do you have a favorite game?
So growing up, it was pretty much all card games, like just playing card games. Yep. So euchre is probably my absolute favorite. Yeah. Like we play so much euchre. But I've gotten kind of into some of the more elaborate board games. There's one called Patchwork. Ooh. It's not super common, but if anyone's interested, look it up, especially since it's a crafting podcast. It's so cute. It's quilt themed.
Oh,
I know this was an elaborate answer for a very simple question.
No, it's okay. No, I asked. I want to hear all about it.
It's quilt themed. So it's very like Tetris with little pieces that look like quilt patches, quilt blocks. And it's a really simple 2-player game. Pretty, like at first it seems complicated, but once you play one, it's pretty easy to learn. I've played it with my now 7 and 8-year-old. They were like 6 and 7 when they learned. Great. Played it with my mom. I played it with my best. Like I played it with so many people, and people really, really like it.
Oh, cool. Is it super competitive, or is it kind of teamworky?
It's not teamworky. So you are still winning
playing
or losing.
Against each other. Sure.
Yeah, you're playing against each other. But yeah, the object is just to go around in a circle, and buttons are currency.
Oh, fun.
And if you earn buttons for sewing patches on your quilt. And you have to place them in a way where, you try not to get empty spaces because it's got like the Tetris-y element.
Sure.
And they've got, Tetris-like shapes to these patches. And you don't want empty holes on your quilt. So you'll lose points at the end of the game if you have too many of those.
Interesting.
And so the person who ends up with the most buttons, the most money at the end of the game wins.
I love that.
So there is a win-lose element, but it's pretty low-key.
Crafting meets games.
Yeah, it's adorable. It's really
Wonderful.
cute.
Great. We'll have to check it out.
That one, the person who last touched a needle goes first. So I always go first when I play that game.
You're like, gotcha.
Yeah. And it's in the rules.
That's so fun. That's great. I love it. It's like just like lightly catered towards those who craft.
Yes,
a little
exactly.
Preferential treatment. That's great. Well, Erin, thank you so much for chatting today. It's so fun to get to know you and all of the, I think, incredible things that you do. I don't know how you have the time. I could talk to you about your garden and all the cool things that you're doing forever and ever. And I hope that everybody listening feels the same way, because I think it's so interesting and cool and such a great variety of interests that you have. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Till next time. So is anybody else just ready to get up and get crafting and get gardening and just start doing more? I think I'm going to start planning a spring garden. I really do. I've been talking about it for a long time. Erin's got me ready to go do it. I'm excited. I'm so grateful to Erin for chatting with us today, and I'm so grateful to you for listening to this episode of the Stitch People podcast. Thanks for enjoying this conversation and other conversations with Stitch people like you. I'd appreciate it if you could take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a rating and review wherever it is that you listen to us. It'll help us shine more cross-stitchy sunshine into the world. You can check out everything Stitch People has to offer at stitchpeople.com, and please connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. We'd love to see all your crafty works in progress. Lastly, I want to really thank all of you in the Stitch People community for your support and your positive and cooperative encouragement of one another. I'd also like to thank the incredible Stitch People team for making all the magic happen behind the scenes. Our fully licensed jazzy tunes were created by Jonathan Boyle, and our extraordinary sound designer is Brandon Yost. Have a wonderful day, my friends. Happy stitching. The Stitch People podcast is a production of Beansky LLC and Stitch People. Copyright 2022, all rights reserved.